Hi, I'm Patricia Serrano.
And I'm Tony Harris. SailTrek is up next.
Here aboard the Starflyer, the pace of life is wonderful, relaxed and mellow, but there's always a hint of excitement about what we'll find over the horizon.
Starting with an experience that dazzles the senses, Tony Harris explains.
They come in all sizes, heights, and locations. They're waterfalls. Scientifically, it's H2O responding to the forces of gravity, but it's much more than science. There is something mesmerizing about a waterfall, and they can be very different depending on other conditions. Sometimes a raging torrent, other times a trickle, but always fascinating to watch. The Caribbean islands are home to hundreds of waterfalls. All have their own story, and this week we visit the Toraille Waterfall on St. Lucia. Toraille is a St. Lucia heritage site, a place where it is of paramount importance for those who watch over it to keep it authentic, as a steward of the falls told our Geraint Georges.
But a property like this, I see myself not so much as an owner, but as a steward, with the responsibility of managing such a resource in a way that is sustainable, in a way clearly that will not compromise the heritage value of the place.
But besides being a good steward to the heritage of Toraille Falls, Hillary is also thrilled when visitors see it for the first time and take the opportunity to experience it.
The reaction of the people, it's amazing. I mean, people walk in and you hear the wow. That's it. You hear that exclamation all the time, wow. And they're a couple yards away. Just once they get the visual, once the impact is huge, it's a wow. So you get the sense that a lot of people have never gotten so close to a waterfall, So it's always a wow. It's always a wonderful impact. And even more when they muster the courage to go under the falls, because I say muster the courage because the water is cold. Well, it has the perception of being cold, and the pressure of the water, and then when they come out of that, it is always so refreshing. That's the catchword. Refreshing, rejuvenating. Sometimes people will say it's cold, but they would add it's refreshing. So and it's always really nice hearing that kind of experience. Okay, now that we said so much about the waterfall, it's your turn to try it out. Just one thing, if it's cold, keep that comment to yourself, okay?
Why not? Let's go.
Let's go.
Toraille Waterfalls is a unique place. Not only a beautiful place one can see, but something even more special. A place where visitors can be at one with nature and truly connect with the spirit of the Caribbean.
One of the great things we find each time we visit someplace new are the fascinating and unique people we didn't expect.
Like those dedicated to protecting coral reefs and biodiversity. Jim Scott has more.
We're all familiar with the tranquil waters of the Caribbean. Beneath the waves, there exists an equally beautiful world, but one that is increasingly troubled caused by climate change and by us. The SailTrek SOC team has followed efforts by many throughout the Caribbean to deal with the problems afflicting the coral reefs and the dedicated efforts by many to replace, restore, and save the reefs. It is a problem that many are working on, and as we hear in this report from our friends at the Inter-American Development Bank, the rush to save the reefs affects us all.
I would hate to think of a world without the corals. The corals is like an empire in its own right. So a world without the corals would be a devastated world. It would be like going to Mars or the moon. The coral reefs provide about 45% of the proteins that human beings need for survival. Coral reef has a certain tolerance level, which is influenced by the sea temperature, the amount of acidity, and the amount of UV light that reaches it. In the case of climate change, we expect that all three of those parameters will change in the negative sense. The temperature of the sea at the moment is right at the upper limits of tolerance of coral reefs.
They're important because they provide shoreline protection, and they only function that way when they're alive.
corals do their part by breaking the waves from coming inland, while the mangroves do their part to protect the coral by filtration, as well as physical blockage of some of the things that come from human sources, as well as natural sources that may want to enter the sea. So the mangrove soaks up a lot of these nutrients and stops a lot of these sediments and even garbage, solid waste, from entering the sea.
If the corals should die, then the life in the area would also die or go somewhere else. So if you were to lose it, you're losing the livelihood of communities along the coast. Removing that is like cutting off your arms from the human being.
People suggest to combat the threats to coral mortality or loss of coral reefs should start with us. We know that sewage, we know that pollution, we know that overfishing are all human activities that impede the health of coral reefs.
We've had overfishing, heavy overfishing. We've had pollution, which has led to more algae on reefs. And of course, with the overfishing, we've lost the herbivorous fish that would have taken off the algae. It's a multiplicity of problems. We do coral restoration, and that's perhaps one of our primary tasks, where we're growing coral of different species in different ways to try and find the best method so that we can replicate it all over the country and wherever else.
One of the great things about SailTrek is getting to visit out-of-the-way places, which the pandemic made challenging. Our next story details how COVID-19 impacted the Caribbean travel industry.
As the pandemic continues, it's clear that the phrase "the new normal" is very much a reality still faced by the travel industry, and particularly those here in the Caribbean. And adjusting to it has been a maddening challenge that's much more trial and error than strategic planning. Travelers still love the beauty and serenity of the Caribbean islands, the lush foliage, exotic birds, magnetic blue waters and white sand beaches, that combined with the welcoming nature of the islanders has enticed millions of people to visit every year. But the COVID-19 pandemic had a devastating effect on tourism. The loss of millions of international dollars no longer flowing into the Caribbean economy has had a profound effect on those who depend on it.
We were closed down. We closed our doors and 100% of the employees, including myself, was sent home. But then we got creative and we started producing masks. And we came up with creative things to keep us going. On Sundays we had our Refresh Sunday events, which cater to the local market. We had fashion shows, sales discounts, yoga under the 400-year-old tree. So we got creative and did things to generate income to keep us afloat throughout the pandemic.
Although Caribbean islands have reopened for tourism, there's still a long way to go to get back to pre-pandemic levels. Entry requirements vary per country and protocols are ever changing. But the magnetic appeal still draws tourists back to a region that's unlike any other on Earth. And for the Caribbean people and their visitors, the new normal might soon be just as rewarding.
Another great week with a lot of stories that we really enjoyed sharing with you. So keep the wind in your sails, and we'll see you back here soon with more SailTrek.